What's ripening, YouTube? So it's getting towards the end of May now. We're pretty deep into the dry season here in Southwest Florida, and I've been seeing a lot of people on social media and friends of mine, and even myself, kind of freaking out a little bit because it's so dry. So dry. You can see my grass is brown. You know, that's a pretty good sign it's dry out here. So it got me thinking about something, and I was thinking about resiliency. And really, I think if you're a homestead or personally gardening for yourself, or even on a small scale for production farming, I think we should be designing and developing our systems for resiliency over production. And what do I mean by that? What I mean is we need to allow for things like drought and flood and hurricanes and whatever it may be in your area. It could be fire, it could be anything. We need to accept the things that we can't control and work within those constraints and focus on the things that we can control. And how can we do that? So one thing we can do to create a more resilient system or more resilient farm is to plant a variety of species. In this case, you'll see that I've got my pineapples, I've got sugar cane in here, and I'm phasing out my bananas all within my mango grove. So yeah, it is a mango grove. That's the long-term intention of this grove. But I'm not relying 100% on my mangoes. And let's be honest, I'm not a mango farmer by profession either. So it's not like I derive 100% of my income from this farm. But just as an example, you know, having more than one crop means that if a drought causes all my fruit to fall off, or a really bad windstorm causes all my mangoes to fall off, I still have pineapples, right? And I still have bananas. If we get a flood and it wipes out, you know, a bunch of my trees that aren't tolerant of that, like my jackfruit, or if I had avocados out here, I would still have my mangoes and my sapodillas and my bananas and my sugarcane and things that can handle those types of weather extremes. So resiliency is kind of playing to both sides of the extremes. Another thing that's really important here in terms of resiliency is wind protection. So I was just talking to a friend of mine, and he said that a lot of his mangoes had been blown out of the trees from the recent windstorms we've had. And I'll be honest, I've had a few fall, but I mean, nowhere near what I've been hearing about other people having. Part of that is because my trees aren't all by themselves. There's other elements, like in this case, there's a mid-row of plants. So if the wind's blowing across, it has to go through that to get to that. And then I've also planted taller trees. I've got a windbreak system along my north, which is where I get my coldest winds. And I'm constantly trying to develop and change and improve that situation as well. Another element of resiliency, which honestly I wish I had developed already, but it just hasn't been available to me yet, is resiliency in your ability to distribute water. So that might be an irrigation system, it might be a system of ponds, you know, from high to low, depending on the type of terrain you're on. In my case, I'm on flat land, and I have way too much water in the summer and not enough water, you know, during the dry season, which is winter and spring for us here. The way that I've created a resilient system is using the materials that I have available, which is the wood chips. That's what's holding moisture at my soil surface. And then I'm also interplanting. And for me, I had this conversation with another friend of mine recently, and I said, well, you know, we've all kind of trained ourselves how to use wood chips to create a farm or to get production in a food forest. What happens when you can't get the wood chips? You know, what happens when the wood chips become a really valuable resource and people start paying more than you're willing to pay, and then you just can't afford it, and it's not a reasonable thing for you? Or what happens if people stop chipping wood because of any other economic constraint? Maybe it's just not something people get paid to do anymore, so they're not trimming trees and you just don't have the material. So the term that I came up with was big wood chips, peak wood chips. So like peak oil, what happens when we basically run out of the resource, or it becomes impossible to extract it from the earth so that we can use it economically. So what happens when we have peak wood chips? We've all kind of gotten used to that. Part of the agroforestry stuff that I'm into is developing systems that produce enough organic matter for themselves. That's a type of resiliency. That's a really powerful type of resiliency, actually, because when you interplant like that, the benefits are compounded, and you are creating more labor for yourself potentially than you would be if you were just conventional farming and you were spraying and doing other things. But you also have different types of costs. Maybe you'd have different types of labor costs, but you wouldn't have the pesticide costs, or things. Some of those things kind of offset. But that's another type of resiliency. So in terms of, I talked about having multiple species or multiple crops to kind of hedge your bets in case of extreme weather conditions or other types of conditions that are outside of your control. Another thing you can do is to grow a variety of one species. So it's coming to light nowadays that many of these mango varieties perform differently under different situations and different conditions. Some of them are prone to anthracnose or other types of bacterial and fungal diseases. Some of them are more or less productive or more or less consistent. And of course, some of them are more or less desirable in terms of their flavor or the size of the fruit. So having a variety is really beneficial in that way as well. Having a variety is also a little bit of a pain in the booty for someone like me, because I'm selling fruit and I have to label everything because I don't have mango. I have 60 varieties of mangoes. So for me to be able to maintain a good market price, I need to know what I have, and I need to label it properly and all that kind of fun stuff. But having the varieties is another form of resiliency. So perhaps one of the most important forms of resiliency, in my opinion, would be what I call storage crops, or calorie crops. I have a lot of things planted. You'll see right here, I've got yams that are resprouting. These are ones that I did not harvest last year. Here's another one right here. So those yams are sitting there in the ground, and I don't have to pick them. They can sit there and grow bigger and bigger and bigger every year until I need them. So for me, resiliency in that case is that I have calories sitting there waiting for me. So if I can't go to the store and buy bread or buy whatever it is that I want to buy that's going to fill my belly, I can go here, pull out a yam, and have something. I have something here. And yams is just one example. We have anything you can imagine that's a staple. It could be potatoes, corn, could be cassava, could be sweet potato, could be any number of things that you can either store in your house or store in the ground. That's a really powerful form of resiliency, because I don't have to go to the grocery store. I do all the time. Don't get twisted like I'm living off the land. I don't have that aspiration. It's not one of my goals. But I could. I have tree spinach. I have my calories in the ground. I have a variety of fruit trees here. Another really important form of resiliency is in your social system. So for me, I've developed good relationships with some of my neighbors. My neighbors next door, they don't really have any fruit trees. They have a couple of old mangoes that have been there since, I think one of the mango trees is like 100 years old. But other than that, they don't have a lot of food growing, at least not plant food. But they do have a whole flock of chickens. They've got 2 goats. They've got a horse. So there's a barter that can happen. I can go get horse manure to feed my plants. I can trade bananas to them. I can get eggs if I want. I can get chickens and stuff like that from them. That's another type of resiliency. And those relationships like that, they really require you to give and take a little bit. You don't just get indefinitely forever, and it doesn't feel good that way. You want a relationship with your neighbors that feels good. You're both giving and you're both receiving, and that's definitely a comfortable thing to have, is a neighbor that has something that you don't, and you have something that they don't, and you're both happier to share than to keep it all to yourself. So I'm curious to hear from you guys, the people that are watching the video. What forms of resiliency have you developed for yourself in your neighborhood or on your land or within your community? And what ways can you increase or improve that resiliency? And how can you bring more people into the fold? How can you create that feeling of safety and comfort for more people around you? And in turn, it just improves you're creating your own new world. How can you develop resiliency for yourself and for your community? All right, so I'm done rambling. Hope you enjoyed walking around the farm with me, hearing my thoughts. I would like to hear some comments see some comments down below. Don't forget to like the video. Let me know what you think about resiliency and what you're going to do to get things growing at your place. And I'll see you next time.